Good morning. In this week's Parsha, my Bar Mitzvah Parsha, Parshas Va'eschanan, we actually see for the second time the Ten Commandments. But there's a very interesting difference in the way that they are recorded, specifically with the mitzvah of Shabbos. And we see actually, originally, when we get the mitzvah of Shabbos in Parshas Yisro, the Torah tells us, God tells us explicitly, the reason for the mitzvah of Shabbos is because Hashem created the world in the heaven and earth in 6 days, and he rested on the seventh day. It had to do with creation and God's cessation of work and his rest. But in this week's parsha, we see that the basis for Shabbos, the Torah tells us, we're told to remember that we were a slave in the land of Egypt, and Hashem our God took us out from there with a strong hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, Hashem has commanded us to make the Shabbos day. So the question is, what is to be learned here? What is the Torah emphasizing specifically in this week's parsha, where we see that the connection of Shabbos is because we were slaves? And I think perhaps that the answer is quite obvious. That what are we doing essentially when we're observing Shabbos, when we're celebrating Shabbos? When we are celebrating Shabbos, we are essentially saying that I am a slave of nothing or nobody except a servant of the Almighty, but I am a slave to no one. And we know that whether that means I'm not a slave to work or no one else, my boss, my employer, nobody can tell me to come work on Shabbos. And by me observing Shabbos and taking that day off, I am essentially saying that I unlike when I was in Egypt and we're slaves to Pharaoh, right now I'm a slave to nobody. Or whether it's not work, and nowadays we're blessed, where we don't really have to battle and fight to have Shabbos as off. But if it's not work, then perhaps it's something else. What are we enslaved to that we put aside on Shabbos? So by turning off the technology, by putting away my phone, I am saying I am not a servant. I am not enslaved to my phone. There's one day a week I put it away. I am not enslaved to Netflix, to the baseball games, whatever it is. I'm not enslaved to that. One day a week I'm able to put it away. I'm able to reflect on what it means to be free, on what it means to be a person who is not enslaved to anything, what it means to be a servant to the Almighty. And again, I can just bask in the joy and the beauty of Shabbos and reflect on my life and the beauty and the blessings all around me. And that's what Shabbos is all about. And it's not a time of enslavement. And it's just very beautiful, actually. We see when the Jewish people are enslaved in Egypt, and Moshe and Aaron ask Pharaoh for a day off. Pharaoh basically says, no, I'm not going to give them this day of rest. I can't do it. And perhaps the reason that Pharaoh understood that that if he would have given them a day off, a day of rest, they could have refreshed themselves. They could have rejuvenated themselves and made a plan to get out. And Pharaoh, as someone who wanted to keep them enslaved, he understood he couldn't do that. So let's all exercise our freedom and joy and take joy and bask in the delight and beauty and serenity of Shabbos. We should all have a beautiful and lovely Shabbos.